Part 16. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 152. After finalizing the final plan, everyone began to make preparations. Layton dismantled some relatively intact parts from the equipment debris on the ground, repaired everyone's power armor, and then pieced together a set of light armor for Yvonne that could barely run and jump. As for Asano Akira, who had just woken up, he declined Layton's proposal. "My abilities are, well, special, and the power armor will limit me." These were Asano Akira's exact words. Hound, K-Lan, and Zwilligitu replenished their ammunition on the spot. Since they couldn't find electromagnetic bombs specifically designed for the Gauss gun, Hounds simply changed their weapons to dual-wielding Gatling cannons and hung them on their backs. There were 6 large boxes of ammunition chains attached. When I led the troops to clean up the indigenous creatures, I often worried about insufficient firepower. I'm afraid I won't be able to change this problem in this life. Faced with Ian's speechless eyes, the Hound said with an embarrassed smile, "But fortunately this armor is really powerful enough to carry nearly a ton of ammunition. Actually, I hope you don't use any of these ammunition. If the sound of gunfire attracts those monsters that have left the base, they will be really dead if they are surrounded in a place like this." I know, I just want to comfort myself." Hound said so, but in the end he gave up the Gatling cannon and chose a light assault rifle. "K-Lan, things are not good." After cleaning the battlefield, Layton came over and said to K-Lan, "I counted the number of corpses and equipment, and they don't match up. There is a big difference, at least half of them. The above corpses are all missing, and the ones left behind are basically some seriously damaged corpses. It seems, those monsters are indeed mass-produced using human corpses. The purpose of these monsters killing humans is to obtain as many corpses as possible to expand their own numbers. We have to act quickly, otherwise there will be more and more monsters. There were originally 3 checkpoints set up on the passage between the base and the mine entrance, but now, the conditions of these 3 checkpoints are simply terrible. Even the steel structure tower used as a communication antenna is under attack by acid. The barrier was broken in the middle, and the 2 small sentry booths built with foam sandwich steel plates were directly raised to the ground. There were bloodstains, but no body was found. "They were probably dragged away by those monsters," Layton, the pioneer, said after a quick glance. "The things here are no longer something we can handle. Even the Soma Consortium may not be able to deal with these monsters. 9 times out of 10, the military directly sent a fleet and dropped a dozen small tactical nuclear bombs to clear the area. By the way, K-Lan, can the safe house in the base withstand a nuclear explosion?" "This level of safe house nuclear strike protection capability has rigid requirements, so don't worry about that," K-Lan said as he activated the power armor's jetpack and jumped directly onto a hilltop in front of him. Looking from here, one can barely catch a glimpse of the Soma Consortium's mining base. As we expected, the base fell, the energy shield disappeared, and many buildings were emitting thick smoke. K-Lan turned around and said, "What about the monster? Have you seen it?" "Not yet." K-Lan shook his head. "Keep going." After they climbed over the last mountain pass and entered the central mountain col where the base is located, an unbearably strong smell of blood quickly occupied their nostrils. K-Lan only felt waves of discomfort in his throat. Fortunately, it has been a long time since the last meal, and the esophagus and stomach are empty, otherwise I might have vomited in the helmet at this time. I really can't stand this smell." The Hound, who has the sharpest sense of smell in the team, has closed the visor of his helmet, and his face has become extremely pale. How many people have died?" According to the data given by the Soma Consortium, including mercenaries and miners who take turns to rest, the permanent personnel of the base range from 2,400 to 2,800. It is estimated that most of them are here. "I'm afraid there's more." Yvonne frowned and shook his head. "If those monsters have the habit of dragging away corpses, then the smell of blood here shouldn't be so strong, plus we didn't have any monsters turning back into the mine along the way. Traces. I suspect. Hearing what Ivan said, the hound's eyes suddenly widened. Damn, no way. Doctor, don't scare me. Although I can't be sure for the time being, I think those monsters may have hoarded the corpses here. Old dog, can you please smell it? There is no rancid smell unique to the fermentation and decay of corpses in this bloody smell. You are simply torturing me. The hound sighed helplessly, opened the mask again, pondered for a while, and then took a big breath. Suddenly, his face became paler. Cough cough cough, vomit. After retching for several seconds, the hound said with some difficulty, there is indeed a very strong rotten smell mixed with the smell of blood, and it is the kind of rotten smell emitted by the dead. Stink. That fact should be close to home. Ivan's face was also quite ugly. Generally speaking, even in places where microorganisms are extremely active, freshly dead corpses will not emit a rancid smell, only death. It took a while for the corpses to appear, that is to say, the corpses of those who were killed in the mining area were brought here by monsters. These monsters gathered the corpses in the base. Are they planning to transform here? Ivan, you just dissected the corpse of the sea anemone head. Can you see what conditions are needed for this transformation process? Kaylan looked at Ivan and asked. I have no clue at all. This method of transformation is even more incredible than the seed of corrosion. The seed of corrosion simply uses the container as its own nourishment, and this monster is almost perfect with it. The human bodies were fused together. From a certain perspective, those corpses became alive again after being transformed, and even the apoptosis of the original tissue cells was reversed. This is from a biological perspective, speaking of which, it is simply impossible. But in any case, since those monsters would choose to gather the captured corpses here, even if their large army has left, there will definitely be a few left as guards. The hounds had already begun to think about retreating. Even if there are only a few of them, we can't defeat them. How about another plan of action? Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 153. No rush, let's take a look first. As he said that, Kaylan had already released the drone and flew slowly towards the base. The perimeter of the base was in a complete mess. The defensive positions composed of sentry towers, bunkers, and walls were torn apart like a piece of paper. There were traces of acid corrosion everywhere on the building fortifications and the ground, and the metal armor. The densely packed holes are like a honeycomb. Just a single frame of the picture is enough to cause cardiac arrest in patients with trypophobia. Without the energy shield, these fortifications are just a pile of decorations in front of the sea anemone head. Hound commented from the side. Yes, Kaylan controlled the drone and continued to fly forward. Until now, they have not found any monsters, not even any corpses. Without a corpse, where does the strong smell of blood and corpse odor come from? Until the drone flew directly above the central square of the base. What is this? Looking at the things on the screen, even Ivan, who had always been calm, couldn't help but exclaimed. In the center of the square, there stands a huge cocoon-shaped object nearly 30 meters high. The surface of this thing is covered with a layer of dark pink flesh membrane, and the underside of the flesh membrane is covered with blood vessels that beat rhythmically. The blue-purple veins. This giant cocoon is spindle-shaped as a hole, but there is a bud-like crack at the top. As the giant cocoon squirms slightly, thick and black pus and blood continuously overflows from the crack, along the giant cocoon. The surface of the cocoon slipped. There was even a large pool of blood right below the giant cocoon. That corpse smell, could it be emanating from this thing? Although he only saw it on the drone's camera, the hound still felt waves of heart palpitations for no reason. It seems to be alive, Ivan said. I always feel, this thing seems, like. It seems like something is hatching, right? Kaylan added to Ivan's unspoken guess. Do you have a feeling that those disappeared corpses are actually wrapped in this giant cocoon? Ivan didn't respond, just nodded silently. Kaylan controlled the drone to fly around the giant cocoon, but unfortunately, looking in through the crack at the top of the giant cocoon, he could only see that it was filled with a viscous crimson liquid. As for the liquid soaking inside, it's impossible to see clearly what he's holding. But what surprised Kaylan even more was that he didn't even find a sea anemone head around this giant cocoon, or even in this entire mining base. This was really beyond his expectation. Did those monsters leave after creating this giant cocoon? Isn't this too unreasonable? If this giant cocoon is really the reproduction method of those monsters, based on the instinct of living things, some guarding power must be left to protect the safety of the giant cocoon. Or, they were also swallowed by this giant cocoon? A somewhat outrageous idea suddenly popped into Ian's head. I just don't know if this thing is offensive. Kaylan lowered the height of the drone and aimed the crosshair at the crack on the top of the giant cocoon. The drone was equipped with a mini launcher that could be used to remotely control the cocoon. It can release tactical equipment such as shock bombs and smoke bombs at a distance. However, due to weight restrictions, it can only carry 2 rounds of ammunition at a time. Kaylan set the detonation mode to collision detonation, and then launched 2 shock bombs towards the giant cocoon at once. The silver-white cylindrical projectile drew a graceful arc in the air and fell into the crack accurately. Immediately, a burst of bright light burst out from it, accompanied by a deafening buzzer. Nothing happened, and the giant cocoon did not make any emergency response to this sudden attack. How about this? Kaylan thought for a moment and said to the others, I'll go over and take a look first. You guys wait outside the base. If something unexpected happens, you can directly execute Plan B. The so-called Plan B is actually to ask for help from the consortium stationed in several other bases. However, this plan has an obvious drawback, that is, no one can be sure whether other consortiums are willing to lend a helping hand. Moreover, if the situation is worse, they might even be imprisoned and tortured for their words and deeds. Anyway, thousands of people have died in this incident, and adding a few of their names to the list of victims is not too many. What nonsense are you talking about? Can't you think more about the good things? Hound rolled his eyes at him and said. Be prepared for the worst in everything. After Kaylan said this, he stood up and walked towards the base step by step. Beep, beep, beep. As soon as Kaylan stepped into the base gate, the Geiger counter alarm sounded in his ears, which showed that the radiation in the base now exceeded the safety threshold that humans can withstand, and before the base was breached, this area the radiation concentration is almost negligible. Radiation? Is it caused by that big guy? With such doubts in mind, Kaylan continued to walk forward slowly. Beep, 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 beep. As the distance between Kaylan and the giant cocoon continued to shrink, the alarm sound of the Geiger counter became more and more urgent. When it was only the last 100 meters, the beeping sounds were almost connected in a series. Even wearing a powered armor with protective clothing function, Kaylan could feel the uncomfortable tingling sensation on his skin. The radiation concentration in this place has far exceeded the deepest part of the mining area. The inside of this thing, couldn't it be filled with radioactive materials? Kaylan originally thought about getting a pile of explosives to blow up the giant cocoon, but now he has completely given up on this idea. If this thing explodes, it will be almost equivalent to a super dirty bomb. Not to mention the mountain COL where the mining base is located. It is estimated that with this as the center, the area within a radius of several kilometers will become a dead land. The only good news is that the thing doesn't seem to have biological sensing. I've come so close, but there's still no reaction at all. Kaylan walked around the giant cocoon, and then got a little closer. He could vaguely hear the sound of gurgling inside the giant cocoon, and the image of large chunks of flesh and blood rolling in the thick and boiling slurry appeared in his mind. We can't get any closer, The radiation is too strong. In less than 10 seconds, Kaylan had already begun to feel dizzy. He quickly distanced himself from the giant cocoon and at the same time took out an antibiotic. The radiation injection was inserted into the injection port reserved in the power armor arm. "Come here, this thing doesn't look dangerous at the moment, it's just that the radiation is very high, so don't get too close. In addition, there should be prepared protective clothing in the ruins outside. Ask Asano Akira to find one and put it on, from this place. The radiation has reached a lethal intensity," Kaylan said into the walkie-talkie. "P.S. I encountered something very irritating today, and I want to tell you all. My last novel, Code of Survival in the Wasteland, was stolen again on the Himalayan audiobook platform. The person who stole my novel was stolen from me a few years ago. I negotiated with him and his attitude was okay at the beginning. I didn't go into it too deeply. I just asked him to remove the VIP paid chapters and only keep the free public chapters. I thought this matter would be over. As a result, someone told me today that he was dictating an audiobook, and I found out that the person had changed the title of my novel, and the author became himself. He copied the content of more than 1,000 chapters intact. The total number of views is more than 8 million, and he has also built a fan group of his own, charging novel readers 3 cents for a chapter. He also claims that it is not easy to update because he has to support his family. I was confused. Can stealing other people's things be considered as supporting the family? I am a person who almost died once. I have no job and no income. I don't even think about stealing or cheating. I just want to make money by coding hard by myself. Then others plagiarize my stuff and steal it, blatantly claiming to be the fruits of one's own labor? Why can people be so thick-skinned? I haven't deleted that person's WeChat account yet, so I went through his friends and found something even more shameless. He called a book I'd finished many years ago his new book and did something like popularizing updates in one day. 10 chapters activity, 11 also very down-to-earthly learned what e-commerce companies do to offer discounts on paid chapters. It almost made me laugh. This is no longer considered piracy. The pirate will not change the name of your novel, but will also indicate the original author's ID. Now the author of the book has directly become himself. This is naked plagiarism. I read that the reviews of Himalaya all praise him, and some even pay for updates. Judging from the number of views, I even suspect that the income of this plagiarized book will not even be lower than my original work. This world is really humming magic. Calculating the time, during the time when he completed the plagiarism, I was lying on the hospital bed and being tortured by chemotherapy drugs. Fortunately, I didn't burp, otherwise he wouldn't be afraid that I would come to his door in the middle of the night. Here is the information about the plagiarist. Himalaya ID Fart Duo Duo Her Father 321. The title of the work is Online Games, Strong Man of the End of the World. It is a plagiarism of my old book Wasteland Survival Code. The chapter name is exactly the same as the content of the novel, and this person the WeChat ID is PDD0305. I'm not a famous author. I don't think reading articles can help me with this kind of rights protection. My own personal power is very weak. I hope friends who read this chapter can help me report this book on Himalayas. Who can report it? If there are too many, maybe Himalaya will take it seriously. As for the paid chapters he sold privately in the WeChat group, I really have no control over them. I felt very sad and angry, but there was nothing I could do. The world is so hummed up. Finally, I still hope that everyone can support the genuine version, otherwise the genuine author will really be unable to hold on. I paid last month's royalties 2 days ago, and I will tell you all about it, except for a few old people who have good relations with me in the readership group. In addition to the big rewards from Brother Bian, especially from Brother Bian's alliance leader and the Grand Master of 15 a Bionic Man, Alien Relic Hunter's subscription income last month was 270.73 yuan. What can you do with this little money in 2021? It's almost enough to cover my medication for a week. Fortunately, medical insurance can reimburse me for blood tests and so on. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 154. After confirming that there were no monsters around, Hound and the others filed into the base and met Kaylan in the central square. It's really more spectacular when you get closer. Yvonne looked up at the giant cocoon. It's incredible. I really don't know how those creatures created it in such a short period of time. It's easy. Layton pointed to the cameras around the square. Just go to the general control building and look at the surveillance videos. By the way, you can also know where the monsters that attacked the base have gone. Let's go to the main control building and see if there are any usable aircraft on the rooftop apron. Kaylan took the lead in crossing the square and led everyone into the main control building. The situation on the first floor of the general control building was not much better than outside. All kinds of broken furniture and equipment were scattered on the floor. The floor-to-ceiling windows on both sides were all smashed to pieces. Congealed blood stains could be seen everywhere. An armored vehicle even hit the building directly. Entering the corridor, the explosive ammunition blew a big hole in the entire wall. Everyone quickly walked into the control room. However, there had also been fierce battles here. The monitor and the chassis were full of bullet holes. Layton squatted down and cut open the chassis with a welding gun. He took a look and saw that the inside was broken into pieces. Hard drive and shook his head at everyone. Go upstairs. There must be a backup copy of the surveillance video in Manstein's computer, Kaylan said. The stairs leading to the second floor had been blown apart. Fortunately, everyone was equipped with power armor and jumped directly to the second floor with a slight jump. Like the first floor, the corridor on the second floor was also full of bullet holes, bloodstains, and monster claw marks, but no body was found. Look here, Layton, who was walking on the other side, seemed to have discovered something and shouted in a low voice, "This doesn't seem to be a monster's claw mark, this mark." Kaylan turned around and saw that it was an extremely thin and straight cut. It was about 1.5 meters long and made an angle of about 45 degrees from the bottom to the ground. The scratch made by the monster's claws, the mark and this mark, are completely different. There is no damage to the wall at the edges of the traces. The traces are very deep. It is visually estimated that more than 3 centimeters have been cut into the wall. This trace should have been cut by an extremely sharp blade. This person dares to use such a weapon to deal with those monsters. Either he's an idiot, or he's a master. Kaylan couldn't help but look at Akira Asano, who was following him. Asano, come and see, what is the approximate level of the person who made this knife? Akira Asano stepped forward, stretched out his hand and touched the knife mark on the wall. He was silent for a moment, and then said, "I may not be his opponent." "What?" This time it was Ian's turn to be shocked. "You mean, after using that ability, you are still no match for this person?" "If he tried his best, then I'm not sure." Asano Akira's fingers gently rubbed the knife marks, because with this knife, the person didn't use all his strength, and even had a lot of remaining strength. Kaylan and the others are all aware of Akira Asano's strength. A 3-meter sea anemone head that can wipe out all of them in just a matter of seconds will come out in a matter of seconds. If another one with power no less powerful than him emerges, it will happen in seconds. Even a swordsman stronger than him, this is really too magical. If it weren't for the decoration in the general control building that still maintained the minimalist sci-fi style of arc, Kaylan almost thought they had traveled through time in a martial arts novel. Such a strong guy should still be alive now. Layton whispered. Not necessarily. Kaylan looked at the knife marks on the wall and shook his head. No matter how strong he is, he can't kill a large group of those monsters on the opposite side. This is already the limit of a cold weapon. Wait a minute. It doesn't seem right. Kaylan said, suddenly moving forward and observing the wall carefully. Asano, try to imitate the way this man draws out the knife. Give me a knife, I mean use the scabbard. Don't use force. Just imitate the trajectory of his knife, K-Lan said and stood up. Beside the wall, when Asano Akira's scabbard came into contact with his body, he immediately asked Asano Akira to stop, and then called Ivan over. Ivan, look, Asano's scabbard hit my neck exactly. If my head is cut off at this angle, which direction will the blood in my veins spurt out? Generally speaking, the arteries that cause bleeding are mainly the internal carotid artery and the external carotid artery in the neck. One is at this position and the other is at this position, Ivan said while using a laser sight on K-Lan pointed out the corresponding parts of his body. If it was cut in this way, the direction of the blood spray should be. At this point, Ivan was also stunned, because on the wall behind K-Lan, right above the knife mark, there was just such a blood stain. The blood of those monsters is as thick as asphalt and will not flow out at all. This knife killed a human being, K-Lan concluded. What the someone would attack one of his own at this time, Layton couldn't help but cursed. He may not be killing one of our own, in short, be careful. Even if you see humans, they may not be our allies. K-Lan patted the knife mark on the wall and continued walking forward. At this time, Asano Akira suddenly spoke, 12 meters ahead, the first door on the right, there is movement behind the door. Is it that kind of monster? K-Lan asked. Hound and Layton had already drawn their guns and pointed at the door Asano Akira mentioned. There are two breathing sounds, the frequency is consistent with humans, they should be survivors, Asano Akira added. I know, K-Lan said to the hounds and the others, and walked to the door softly. It can be known from the door number that this room is the office of the base director, Manstein's secretary. K-Lan pulled out his pistol and put it against the door. Then he motioned for Layton to come forward and used a welding gun to cut the door lock. Open. This door was originally equipped with an alarm device, but now the defense system of the entire control building has been paralyzed. Even if they blow the door open directly, the alarm device will not be triggered. In less than 10 seconds, the welding gun cut open the door lock. K-Lan gently pushed the door open, put the energy shield at the front, and walked in. The room was filled with a strong smell of perfume, but in this perfume smell, it seemed to be mixed with a hint of urine smell. The floor of the room is covered with thick carpets, and the bookcases, desks, coffee tables, and chairs are all made of expensive solid wood. Opposite the desk, there is a finely crafted leather sofa. At the very back of the office is a large wardrobe built into the wall, which is obviously the only place in the entire office where people can hide. Stop hiding, come out, we are from the Soma Consortium. K-Lan pointed the gun at the closet and said. After almost half a minute, the closet door creaked and opened half a crack. After several seconds, a beautiful and disheveled woman stumbled out of the closet. This woman was wearing a blood-stained professional skirt, with messy brown curly hair hanging over her shoulders. There were obvious signs of moisture on the edge of the skirt and dark brown stockings, and the high heels she was wearing were even more wet. It was only one higher than the other, and the broken heel fell not far from the wardrobe. Are you really from the Soma Consortium? The woman shrank her neck, glanced at K-Lan with some fear, and asked cautiously. Yes, I am K-Lan, the nominal person in charge of this base, also your immediate boss, K-Lan replied. Are you Mr. K-Lan? The woman raised her head in surprise. This time, she finally saw K-Ian's face clearly behind the mask. K-Lan had some impression of this woman. When Manstein came to greet them, she was right behind him. It seemed that she was indeed the owner of this office. Where is the other one? K-Lan tapped the thigh armor with the handle of the pistol, making a crisp metal collision sound. Mr. Manstein, are you still planning to hide in the closet? The secretary could be asked to come out first to confirm the situation. Apart from Manstein himself, there was no other person with such a status in this base. Mr. K-Lan, are you All of you, still alive. When Manstein crawled out of the closet, the hound had already rushed up and grabbed him by the collar. Picked him up completely. What do you mean we are all still alive? The hound growled at him. Okay, you guy, you finally fell into my hands, now you can start praying dash. Don't, Mr. Hound, this is a misunderstanding, Manstein shouted hurriedly. Misunderstanding? What a misunderstanding, the hound just raised his fist, but before it could hit him, Manstein screamed. No, no, no. Don't do it. It's really not me. The person who ordered the fire is not me, it's you, it's the female secretary you brought. She is a spy of the Mitsui Consortium. She modified your communication channel, and forged the news that you were all killed by unknown creatures, and then used my name to issue an order to the camp to close the mine. It was all done by that woman, you really can't blame me. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 155. What about Liao Zilang? The hunter who was with us, the hound, still didn't put Manstein down. Where are the others? Is he still alive? Tell me quickly. I don't know. The situation was in chaos at that time. He was injured by the person who responded to the female spy. I don't know anything after that. Manstein's word order was a bit confusing. He was confused, couldn't speak clearly, and was obviously severely frightened. Old dog, calm down. Kaylan patted the hound on the shoulder. Put the person down first. If you hold him up like this, he won't be able to speak well. Okay. The hound glared at Manstein fiercely, and then threw him onto the sofa next to him. Tell me, Mr. Manstein, what happened? Don't worry, I'll give you enough time to recall, and I hope you won't miss any details, Kaylan said, standing in front of the sofa with his arms folded. Okay, okay. Manstein responded hurriedly. In the beginning, when you just entered the mine, the communication channel between the base and yours had been secretly replaced by that woman. All that can be heard is the audio prepared by the woman, and it is the same on our side. Kaylan recalled that before they encountered those monsters, all communications with the base were formulaic information reports. This level of communication could be fully handled even with recording. At that time, they focused all their attention. Things in the mine have no intention of identifying abnormalities in the communication channels that are so subtle that they are almost negligible. About 2 hours after you entered the mine, a burst of gunfire came from the originally peaceful communication channel, and screams. I vaguely heard. I heard your voice, Mr. Kaylan. It seems that they have been shouting to close the passage quickly to prevent the monster from rushing out, but within half a minute, the communication was unilaterally interrupted. 2 hours. Kaylan calculated the time. It was almost the time when they encountered those sea anemone heads and then requested reinforcements from the base. It seemed that the woman was determined that she and the others alone would not be able to do anything. To deal with those monsters, I decided to start here and deceived other people in the base with half-true and false information. As for my own voice, as long as I collected some of my own sound sources before, I could use some audio software to synthesize it artificially. If it comes out, it will be mixed in the noisy background sound, and people who are not professionals in this field will not be able to distinguish the true from the false. At that time, I was completely stupid. If you sacrificed under the tunnel, then I would definitely be finished. Just when I was in a daze, the woman suddenly used my identity to send a message to the forward camp. I received the order to close the tunnel, Manstein said while trying to remember. Your authority in the command system must have been cracked long ago, right? Kaylan glanced at him and said, if what Manstein said is true, then this conspiracy must have been planned long ago. Okay, it definitely can't be temporary. Now that I think about it, it should be like this. Manstein lowered his head, and a drop of sweat the size of a soybean rolled down from his forehead and hit the soft plush carpet. but I didn't pay attention to it at that time. All I could think about was your death in the mine. Moreover, at that time, I thought that closing the mine was an order you asked Yui to give, so there was no first time notice that there was something wrong with that woman. Mr. Kaylan, I am very sorry, I have an unshirkable responsibility for this matter. Don't apologize in a hurry. What's next? Those monsters, what's going on? I really don't know about this. Manstein said with some frustration. After mine number 7 was closed, a large number of monsters suddenly emerged from the tunnels of mine number 8, number 9, number 10, and number 11. After rushing out, the staff stationed at the camp at the entrance to the 4 mines were killed by the monsters in an instant. Then those monsters came straight to the base? Then why didn't you organize a defense? Is it because of that woman? Kaylan asked. Yes, Manstein nodded quickly. After these monsters appeared, everyone in the base was shocked, and the woman who reacted fastest to the shock was the woman. Before we all recovered, she suddenly drew her gun and started shooting. She killed several of the command staff in the base in an instant. Fortunately, my personal bodyguard stopped in front of me and replaced me. I blocked those fatal bullets, and I was lucky enough to survive. Manstein said, glancing at the Hound with some fear. Then, Mr. Liao Zilang started fighting with the woman, but because Liao Zilang was shot twice at the beginning, he was always at a disadvantage. The woman was still. The door to the command room is locked, and the guards outside are unable to come in to help. Liao Zilang was shot. What caliber of bullet was it? Where was the shot? The Hound looked very excited. The caliber, I'm not sure about the caliber. The woman used a dual-wielding pocket submachine gun. I guess the bullets shouldn't be very powerful. As for the shot area, it should be around the chest and abdomen. Fart. You're lying. The Hound suddenly took a step forward, scaring Manstein, and immediately shrank into the corner of the sofa. Liao Zilang has a very special physique. The bullets from that pocket submachine gun can even hit his skin. If you don't wear it, you'll only be slightly injured at most, so how can you not beat a girl? I really didn't lie. I saw Mr. Liao Zilang being suppressed by that woman all the time. You dash. Just when the Hound was about to reach out to catch Manstein, Kaylan took the first step and held his wrist. Old dog, what he said is not necessarily false. If Yu Yishi is really a spy lurking within the Soma Consortium, so it is normal to hide her strength. After all, our knowledge of her is limited to the written information provided by the Consortium. What happened next? The Hound took several deep breaths before adjusting his mood and turned to Manstein and asked. At that time, I wanted to open the door to the command room, but I found that the base defense system had been invaded by a virus, and it could not recognize my instructions. Later, those who came to rescue her arrived, and they killed her. The guards outside seriously injured Mr. Liao Zilang, and took the woman on the stairs and left before those monsters rushed into the base. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 156. Among the people who came to rescue her, was there a samurai who used a long sword. Kaylan pointed to the sword in Asano Akira's arms behind him. It looks like this. I didn't pay attention to that. Manstein shook his head. I was lying on the ground pretending to be dead and didn't dare to move. How could I have the mind to pay attention to those people's equipment? Then how do you know she is a spy of the Mitsui Consortium? Those people, they use Japanese when communicating with each other, and their clothes also have the logo of the Mitsui Consortium printed on them. What about Liao Zilang? Hound asked. Since he is not dead, where is he now? I don't know this. I waited until the sound of the plane faded away and then I just got up from the ground. By then, Mr. Liao Zilang had disappeared. You don't know what to ask, so what the hell is the use of keeping you? The Hound cursed angrily, but he did not take any violent action against Manstein again. My secretary can also testify that she was with me at that time, Manstein said quickly. while the secretary with a frightened face nodded crazily. Kaylan glanced at the two of them, then took the hound and the others to the other side, and said in a voice that only they could hear, even if there are some discrepancies in what Manstein said, the facts should still be the same. 10. I worked backwards based on these clues, and this should be the most reasonable explanation. Damn it, I didn't expect that we would be tricked by that bitch, Hound said bitterly. This revenge must be avenged, and we can't let that bitch die too happily. It's best to strip her off, throw it naked into the nest of the hookworm, and let her feel the sensation of her belly being cut open and torn apart from the inside out. Kaylan sighed and said, I'm afraid that woman's performance along the way was all staged, and we were all fooled by her. But there is one thing I doubt. Manstein said that those people's clothes were there is the logo of the Mitsui Consortium. Are these guys so sure that no one will survive in this base, without even the most basic identity disguise, or do they want to put the blame on others? There are only 3 large consortiums controlled by the Japanese, Mitsui, Mitsubishi and Arazaka, but the focus of the Arazaka Consortium is on manufacturing and banking. There is no base in Leviathan, so only the Mitsubishi Consortium is left. Kaylan murmured to himself. So, that bitch is from Mitsubishi. No, we were almost fooled. They are deliberately misleading us. Manstein should have been discovered by those people when he pretended to be dead, but at this time he has no value. It doesn't matter whether he is killed or not. It was deliberately left behind by those people to mislead us. They wanted us to think that they wanted to put the blame on others. If I remember correctly, although the controllers of Mitsui and Mitsubishi are both Japanese, they seem to be the mortal enemy is coming. What you said is too convoluted. What you mean is that this is actually a group of people sent by Mitsui, right? Hound said with a frown. This time it's just my guess. The Soma Consortium will definitely investigate this matter. There is no need for us to wade into this muddy water. The top priority now is to find a way to find the missing Liao Zilang, and to ensure everyone's safety. Kaylan turned his head and looked out the window. The giant cocoon was still standing quietly on the square without any movement. Mr. Manstein. Kaylan walked up to Manstein again. I still have a few questions I need to ask you. Where did those monsters go after they broke through the base? Also, what about this giant monster in the square outside? Cocoon, what's going on? Oh, are you talking about the huge bud outside? That one grew out of the ground. As for those monsters, they all crawled into the bud and never came out again. Oh, by the way, they also threw in the corpses of those who died in the base. I saw it with my own eyes upstairs. Bud. Kaylan took another look at the giant thing outside the window. Indeed, the shape of this thing is very similar to a flower bud, and if according to Manstein, this thing grew out of the ground, using flower bud to describe it would be the opposite. It's more appropriate than giant cocoon. Wait a moment. Is this thing growing out of the ground? The map of the Soma Consortium base that he had seen in the information flashed through Ian's mind. If he remembered correctly, this base was built on Leviathan's spine. Then doesn't this thing grow out of Leviathan's spine? If this thing is not an incubator and is not used to mass produce those sea anemone heads, then what is the purpose of those monsters throwing the corpses in? An unspeakable feeling of fear suddenly surged up. Manstein. Do you know how thick the rock formations below this base are? How far is it from Leviathan's spine? Kaylan asked urgently. The rock layer is probably less than 150 meters thick, right? The base was originally located here because the rock layer here is the thinnest, the closest to Leviathan's body, and the building's stability is the best. Manstein replied with some confusion. He didn't understand why Kaylan suddenly asked this question. What about the foundation? How deep is the foundation of the base? Of course it will penetrate the rock formation directly. The situation doesn't seem to be good. Kaylan walked to the window with a solemn expression and stared at the bottom of the bract. There was a large blood pool made of plasma. As for what was under the blood pool, I'm afraid it's hard to say. What's wrong? Kaylan, Hound, Yvonne, and Leighton all came over. Is there something wrong with this big guy? But we've been here for so long, hasn't it been quiet? There's a problem, it's a big problem. Kaylan thought for a moment, thinking about how he should express it in such language. This thing may have grown directly from Leviathan's spine. Leviathan, maybe not completely dead yet. After saying that, the alpha text on the black stone tablet appeared in front of Ian's eyes again, the resting place of the giant beast that rules the sky. Kaylan realized that he had misunderstood this with human inertial thinking. In a word, human language logic is completely different from that of alpha civilization. In alpha civilization, sleeping means sleeping for a long time, there is no meaning of death at all. And the reason why there are no powerful indigenous creatures around Leviathan is not because those indigenous creatures are afraid of the remaining power of this ancient beast after its death, but because it is alive. P.S. Let me tell you some good news. The account of the guy who plagiarized my novel on the Himalaya platform has been banned, and the audiobooks have also been removed. As for his infringement profits, to be honest, it is too difficult to pursue, and I really don't have the energy to file a lawsuit. In short, I am very grateful to all the readers who have helped me in this matter, and thank you for your righteous actions. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 157. This joke is not funny at all. Ivan's facial muscles twitched slightly. Even if this thing grew out of Leviathan's spine, it might be some kind of parasite. Since it is a parasite attached to Leviathan's spine, why has it never been discovered in the past few decades? If I remember correctly, every mining base is built on top of the spine. If there were parasites on Leviathan's spine, the construction of the base would have been stopped long ago. But Yvonne wanted to say something more, but was interrupted by Kaylan. Whether this thing belongs to Leviathan's body or some kind of parasite, you can find out by digging down along the root system. You want to dig things out? Are you crazy? The Hound grabbed Kaylan. I think it's better for us to find Liao Zilang first and then leave this place quickly. To be honest, although those monsters have disappeared, but I always feel that something more terrifying will come out. The Hound's gaze also stayed on the giant bract outside. No matter what this thing is, I don't want to stay in this place for a second longer. Mr. Manstein, can the communication equipment in the base still work? I'm afraid this matter cannot be solved by just a few of us. We must report it to ARC immediately. As for the ultra-pure crystals found deep in the mine, I think this will soon no longer be a secret to several other consortiums, and compared with the current troubles, the matter of ultra-pure crystals is no longer that important. If this giant beast is really still alive, then the bracts growing out of its spine are probably a sign of its imminent awakening. If Leviathan wakes up, not only the bases built on its back will be destroyed instantly, and even the safety of the Ark may be threatened. A prehistoric species with such a size would probably be difficult to shake even if all the human fleets were gathered together. It's all destroyed. It was the intruders who did it. All the equipment in the main control room was destroyed. I can't even send a distress signal. Where's the vehicle? Except for the plane they took away, everything else was blown up. What about short-distance communication? There must be some portable equipment that can be used in the base, right? There is only one base within short-distance communication distance. It belongs to the Mitsui Consortium. Manstein said a little feebly. If we send them a distress signal, wouldn't it be equivalent to telling them that there are still people alive here? Yes, if that bitch is from the Mitsui Consortium, asking for help from them would be tantamount to inviting a wolf into the house. This time, Hound was on the same side as Manstein. No, this is not to attract wolves into the house, but to drive wolves away from tigers. Kaylan pointed at the giant cocoon and said, if anything happens to Leviathan, they will also suffer huge losses. From this perspective, we are on the same side. Kaylan turned his head to Layton. Layton, please go to the ruins of the base immediately to collect all usable communication equipment. Old dog, UNs will agree to immediately set up a temporary defense line with the main control building as the center. Use all the explosives and landmines. Yvonne and Layton will search and rescue the survivors hiding in the ruins along the way, while Asano Akira will stay here to protect the safety of Mr. Manstein and his secretary. If Yvonne finds any survivors, he will send them all here. What about you? Hound looked at Kaylan. He suddenly had a bad feeling. Could you be planning to? Well, I plan to explore the blood pool and confirm the root system of this big guy. Before Kaylan finished speaking, the Hound grabbed his shoulders angrily and yelled at him, "Are you really crazy? Do you think you can come out alive after going in? Are you too young to risk your life?" No, 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 Kaylan waved her hands repeatedly. Of course I know how dangerous it is under the blood pool, and I have no intention of going down there myself. Then how do you explore? First find a water pump and try to see if you can drain the blood pool. Kaylan knew in his heart that any normal person, even if it were his former self, would never accept the fact that Leviathan was still alive, but he couldn't tell them the content on the black stone tablet. He wanted to prove this. One thing, if you want to make the Hounds and others, and even the people of the Mitsui Consortium believe that Leviathan is still alive, you must come up with more direct evidence. Sigh, I know I can't persuade you. The Hound suddenly sighed. Then be careful, who knows if the monsters that got into this thing are still alive and will crawl out again. If something happens, send a signal immediately and we will rush over as soon as possible. Okay. Kaylan patted the Hound's arm hard, and there was a muffled sound between the armor and the armor. In the equipment warehouse where most of the mining base collapsed, Kaylan found two almost brand new water pumps. These two water pumps were not comparable to the old antiques under the mine that were about to be scrapped, let alone the small blood pump in the center of the square. Even if the entire square sank underground and turned into a lake, it would not take a few hours to drain it dry. After connecting the drainage pipes and cables, Kaylan pushed the two water pumps to the square. He glanced at the giant cocoon that was 10 stories high, raised his head, and swallowed more than a dozen anti-radiation pills in one gulp. The cost of taking so many anti-radiation drugs at one time is that he will have diarrhea in the next week and doubt his life, but compared to suffering from acute radiation sickness, this side effect is almost negligible. Despite the double protection of protective clothing and medicine, when Kaylan got close to the giant cocoon, the extreme nausea and discomfort still appeared. He glanced at the screen of the Geiger counter. The radiation dose here had reached more than 7,000 millisieverts per hour. If you don't wear protective equipment, just walk around here and your life will immediately enter a countdown. Within 72 hours, skin, blood vessels, muscles, organs, and even the bones will rot and melt, and the body tissues of patients with acute radiation sickness will be like wax baked on a fire, gradually turning into a pool of pus that also carries high doses of radiation. There was an extremely serious nuclear power plant explosion accident on the Earth. Later generations filmed many documentaries about the accident. One of the scenes showed a firefighter lying on a hospital bed, his skin cracked and peeling like dried orange peels. Melted flesh and blood fell from his bones piece by piece. He was not dead at that time, and he was even conscious. In the last days of his life, he could only watch as he turned into a human being. With skeleton. That kind of pain and despair is enough to shock the soul of every moviegoer. Kaylan remembers that when he saw this scene, he accidentally knocked over a stainless steel water glass on the table. Even with complete protective measures, he could not stay too long near the giant cocoon. After setting up the water pump, he immediately distanced himself from the giant cocoon. P.S. Regarding the amount of radiation and radiation dose, it may be vague in previous chapters, but in fact these two are different concepts, which will be explained a little here. The unit of the former is Röntgen, which means the amount of radiation in the environment. For example, The maximum amount of radiation on the roof of the Chernobyl reactor was said to be 20,000 roentgens. The radiation dose is the amount of radiation absorbed by living things and is used to measure the degree of harm of radiation to living organisms is expressed in units of Sievert/MSV/microsv. The measurement unit of the Geiger counter is generally MSV/microsv per hour, which means that so much will be absorbed per hour under the current environment. The dose of radiation, as a comparison, here is a reference data. A full-body CT in the hospital is about 10-20 millisieverts, which is equivalent to the amount of natural radiation absorbed by ordinary people in daily life for 4-8 years. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 158. K-Lan pushed the switch upward with force, and suddenly, a rumbling sound came from inside the two water pumps, which were as tall as one person. It was the sound made by the high-speed rotation of the centrifugal pump blades. Two water pumping pipes made of high-strength polymer are fixed with brackets. One end is directly inserted into the blood pool, and the other end extends into a wastewater pool in the base. That pool was originally used to store crystallized ore after secondary refining. There are also complete protective measures at the bottom, around and outside of the pool for the radioactive wastewater produced. The plasma K-LAN in the blood pool has undergone preliminary testing and is corrosive to a certain extent, but it is far less perverted than those monster acids. It will not be used for water pipes and wastewater pools that have undergone anti-corrosion treatment. No matter what damage is caused, the only problem is that there are a lot of agglomerated scabs in the plasma, which will wear the blades of the pump and easily cause pipe blockage. K-LAN had to stop the water pump almost every 5 minutes or so, and then go up to clear the pipe despite the radiation. After dredging it back and forth 4 times, the water level in the waste pool has reached the warning line, but the height of the blood pool has only dropped by less than half a meter. The capacity of this blood pool isn't quite right. Just when K-LAN stepped forward to clear the pipe for the 5th time, he finally saw the exposed roots underneath the giant cocoon. Although I had been mentally prepared for a long time, when I saw the roots of the giant cocoon, an unspeakable fear still surged up from the bottom of my heart. Countless thick tentacles are entangled together, twisted and weird, their tops are connected to the bottom of the giant cocoon, and their lower ends are soaked in blood as thick as magma. These tentacles have a deep red skin that is almost dark brown. There are many tiny crystal particles scattered on it, and looking through the gaps in these tentacles, you can vaguely see many human limbs slowly squirming in them, folded thighs, palms with missing fingers. The eyeballs were squeezed out. K-LAN even saw a bra with black lace that was soaked in blood. Are these the collected corpses? K-LAN also noticed that these limbs were not only squirming with the tentacles, but also seemed to be sinking slowly. The black lace bra just now was still about 4 or 5 centimeters above the water, but now it is almost sinking. Entered under the blood pool. For some reason, K-LAN suddenly thought of the image of chewed food passing through the esophagus when humans swallow. At this moment, Leighton's voice suddenly came from the earphones. K-LAN, the communication device has been fixed. Yvonne also found 4 injured survivors. Unfortunately, Liao Zilang was not found. Now I'm here, everything is ready, but, do we really want to send a distress signal to the Mitsui Consortium? Send it now. Send a distress signal according to the standard format. The additional information is Emergency 039. If you want to sign it, use Manstein's ID, K-LAN said. The meaning of Emergency 039 refers to suffering an organized attack by a large number of indigenous creatures, and the emergence of new species with huge threats that have never been recorded in the archives according to the regulations of ARC. If any individual or the organization receives a distress message mentioning Emergency 039, it must report it to the ARC headquarters as soon as possible, and rescue the rescue target to the greatest extent within its capabilities. No. Wait a minute, change Emergency 039 to Emergency 000. Don't use Manstein's ID, Use mine. Kaylan stared at the blood pool and said slowly. 000? Are you sure? Layton's voice in the earphone seemed a little hesitant. Yes, just charge 000 rounds. I will bear all the responsibilities. Kaylan made up his mind. Emergency 000 does not specifically refer to a special time. It has only one meaning, and that is an event that directly threatens the Ark and is serious enough to possibly lead to the genocide of mankind has occurred. In the few years since humans first landed on Alpha Planet, Emergency 000 has occurred a total of 46 times, and each time it was resolved only after humans paid a huge price. In the past 20 years, it can be called Emergency 000. Events called Emergency 000 have never happened before. On Earth, the penalty for lying about a fire alarm is only 5 to 10 days of detention and a fine of several $100s, but on the Ark, the consequences of lying about Emergency 000 are enough to make the person involved spend the rest of his life in jail. This still refers to the case where the circumstances are relatively minor and the losses are relatively small. If it causes major losses, even direct gunfire on the spot would not be an exaggeration. What if? Layton still hesitated. I said, I will bear all the responsibilities. Kaylan emphasized again. If possible, I even hope that Ark can fly over and directly use its main gun to shoot the big guy at his feet. Did you find something there? Layton asked nervously. Those monsters seem to be performing some kind of strange sacrificial ritual. They use human corpses and themselves as sacrifices. Sacrifice ceremony. The Hound's voice also appeared in the communication channel. Very similar. I suspect they are trying to awaken this ancient beast. Kaylan, what on earth did you see? I saw it. Before Kaylan could finish his words, a buzzer suddenly sounded in his ears without warning. He felt as if his whole body was floating and flying into the air. He wanted to stretch out his hand, but found that he had lost the feeling of his arm. Not only the arm, he couldn't even feel his body. He was like an unsheathed soul, a pure ball of the conscious body is constantly floating towards the sky. What's the matter? Kaylan only felt waves of sleepiness coming over his brain. He was even deprived of the ability to think, and the vision in front of him gradually began to become turbid. Could it be a hallucination? In this case, triggered. What are the triggering conditions? He vaguely remembered that he was talking to Layton and Hound just now. He turned around and saw something coming out of the blood pool. It seemed to be a long, jet-black crystal. When Ian's diffuse consciousness gathered again, he saw a creature that looked like a giant whale hovering in the air directly below. It was so huge that it was like an island floating in the air. Leviathan. This is Leviathan. But why do you appear here? Kaylan looked around and saw nothing. Then he lowered his head and glanced at the place where his body should have been. Also empty. Although his thinking has returned to normal, he is still in that conscious body state. Is this one of the memory fragments hidden deep in my head? Text, sound, video, has it finally been upgraded to a VR image? Kaylan tried to close the distance between him and Leviathan. As soon as this thought occurred, he found himself instantly appearing on Leviathan's back, less than 10 meters away from this ancient beast. At this time, Leviathan's body was not covered with the rock formations hundreds of meters away. Instead, it was covered with large swaths of earthy gray scales. Between the scales, there were a large number of long strips of inky black crystal. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 159. In the blink of an eye, blood rain suddenly fell from the sky, and dense raindrops plopped down on Leviathan, but when Kaylan took a closer look, he realized that those falling from higher places were not raindrops at all. Instead, they were strips of red flesh worms as thick as a little finger. Falled from such a high place, and it didn't turn into meat. Kaylan subconsciously wanted to reach out and grab it, but then he realized it, in this state, he was just a spectator, cannot have a substantial impact on anything in this video. Like the monsters encountered deep in the mine tunnels, these meatworms also have fleshy tentacles that resemble sea anemones on their heads. They wriggle together and burrow in along the gaps between Leviathan's scales. Go in. Not long after, Leviathan suddenly began to let out bursts of mourning, scarlet blood mist spurted out from the gaps in the scales, and even the interior of the ink-black crystal pillars glowed with a strange red color. As they approached, these crystal pillars exploded at the same time. Scales with a diameter of tens of meters fell off Leviathan's body and fell to the ground. Each scale was accompanied by a large piece of torn flesh. If you look closely, you can see that the flesh is full of flesh bugs burrowing in and out. Leviathan's wounds are even more densely covered with bugs, which are gnawing at the giant beast's body crazily. The acid they secrete can easily turn flesh and blood as hard as alloy into paste. They laid off white worm eggs inside the minced meat, and then more meatworms hatched out. Kaylan suddenly realized that the image he saw in front of him was in fast forward. In just a few dozen seconds, the light and dark changes of the environment had reached 4 times. In other words, the distance from the blood rain, 4 days have passed. I just don't know if I can see what's going on inside Leviathan. Kaylan tried this idea, but nothing happened. It seems that this video also has its limitations. It can only show the scene that was recorded at that time in front of Kaylan. Kaylan couldn't see anything outside the lens. The height of Leviathan began to drop rapidly, and it soon penetrated the clouds. Kaylan controlled his perspective and moved to the periphery. He saw a vast desert directly below Leviathan, and could not see anything related to the Alpha civilization building, but in the middle of the desert, there is an oval formation that is as big as a city. Offer sacrifices to the great gods, and may his favor protect our people. The sacrificial words recited in Alpha language rang in Kayan's ears. At this time, several beams of light shot out from the center of the huge magic circle. The beam of light accurately hit the falling Leviathan. Wherever it comes into contact with the light beam, Leviathan's flesh and blood melts rapidly, just like snow that has been splashed by scalding boiling water. Death ray cannon. Kaylan suddenly realized that the array below was not a magic circle at all, but a destructive array composed of multiple death ray cannons. In the annihilation caused by a huge amount of antimatter, under this situation, even a prehistoric behemoth like Leviathan cannot escape disaster. The giant beast's body had been broken into pieces, but the black skeleton was still intact. Kaylan suddenly discovered that the texture of the giant beast's bones was exactly the same as that of the inky black crystals, but now the insides of these crystals were transparent, a touch of scarlet, looking indescribably weird. It's not right. Kaylan looked at the skeleton with some confusion. This Leviathan had obviously been used as a sacrifice by the Alpha people to their so-called great gods, but the remains of Leviathan in the real world were very complete. Could it be that this Leviathan is not the one discovered by humans? Boom. Even with only the skeleton left, the sound of Leviathan hitting the ground was still astonishing, and the smoke and dust raised were hundreds of meters high and shot straight into the sky. However, because this video was fast-forwarded, the dust in the sky dissipated in less than 10 seconds. Kaylan discovered that a bright red flesh film had grown on Leviathan's bones. He's not completely dead. All he has left is his skeleton. Can he still regenerate? The astonished Kaylan quickly zoomed in, and finally saw the chilling truth. Countless crimson flesh worms gathered from all around. They were crowded together, squirming, entangled, sticky. White secretions overflowed from the surface of their bodies, and after contacting the air, they quickly turned into dark brown, and those oxidized brown secretions seemed to have extremely strong solubility, and the flesh insects that came into contact with them they were all dissolved into pools of pus, and countless dissolved flesh worms gathered together to form the bright red flesh film covering the Leviathan's skeleton. And what Kaylan saw just now in the distance was this thing. Hiss. Kaylan took a breath. Even though he knew that the images in front of him were illusory, he still felt his scalp numb and his whole body seemed to be extremely itchy. Kaylan only felt that the scene in front of him was particularly weird. Those bugs devoured the flesh and blood of the giant beast, but at this moment they became part of the giant beast's body, like some kind of continuous cycle process. Finally, the image ended, everything stopped, and Ian's vision gradually became blurry. When it became clear again, he had returned to the real world. In the earphones, Hound and Leighton were calling his name continuously. "Ah, I'm here. I was a little dizzy just now. Maybe it's because of the strong radiation." Kaylan responded quickly. "You almost scared me to death. I thought something happened to you." The Hound's voice not only sounded in the earphones, but also came from behind Kaylan. Kaylan looked back and saw that the Hound had run away. When he arrived at the square, he even had a six-pack rocket launcher on his shoulders. "The radiation near the giant cocoon is too strong." "How long have I been distracted just now?" Kaylan asked in a casual tone. 5 minutes, the Hound held out 5 fingers towards Kaylan with a straight face. "Is it only 5 minutes?" In Ian's impression, in that virtual image, even if it was fast-forwarded, the whole process was at least more than half an hour. From this point of view, in that state, next, his consciousness perception of the flow of time will also change accordingly. "Leighton and I called you for a long time and you didn't respond. We almost died of panic." Is this the thing you just mentioned?" Hound asked, pointing to the blood pool. It was a hexagonal crystal column as dark as ink, with a hint of scarlet color inside. "You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 160. What is this? It seems to have a very low density, and it can actually float on the blood pool. The Hound's tone was full of doubts. "Not sure, maybe it's some kind of associated crystal mine." Of course Kaylan knew what it was. Leviathan's skeleton was made of this kind of crystal, but he couldn't explain it to the Hounds and the others. Associated mine? How come this thing appears here? Isn't there no mineral vein under Manstein's base? Below the base? Kaylan seemed to have thought of something and suddenly said, "By the way, Hound, have you found a usable computer in the main control building? It would be best if it could be connected to the base database. The computer in Manstein's secretary's office can be used, but the LAN database cannot be accessed. The network server of the entire base has been blown up. If you want to check information, you can only check it on that computer." "Local files?" Hound shrugged. "Local files, there might be something I want in the secretary's computer. Old dog, please help me keep an eye on this place. I'll be right back." After saying that, Kaylan quickly ran towards the main controller building. In the office, in addition to Manstein and his female secretary, there are 4 new faces. They are all survivors who Ivan rescued from the ruins. The 3 people's injuries are relatively minor and they have been injured. The treatment was completed, and the condition of the last person was worse. Both of his thighs were cut off, the tissue at the wound was necrotic, and the massive blood loss made him fall into a coma, while Ivan was a little confused. He sat slumped on the ground aside, his hands and clothes covered with bright red blood. Seeing Kaylan barging in, everyone in the room focused their attention on him. Ivan raised his head and glanced at him, then slowly shook his head. "I tried my best. The operation was successful and the blood was all gone." It stopped, but before we found him, he had already lost too much blood, and there was no spare plasma, so I couldn't save him. Perhaps because there are too many insiders concentrated there. The base's infirmary is one of the most completely destroyed buildings. Ivan even uses the equipment he carries with him for surgery, which can stop bleeding. Living there is no easy task. I asked everyone about their blood types. Unfortunately, there was only one injured person with type A blood. I tried to transfuse him with a small amount of type O whole blood, but he suffered a severe hemolytic reaction, plus there's no suitable fluid here to serve as a substitute for blood. He can last up to half an hour. It can only be said that everyone has his own destiny. Kaylan sighed, nodded to Yvonne, and then turned to look at Manstein. When Kaylan saw him like this, Manstein was immediately startled again, and he quickly came up to him with a flattering look on his face. "Mr. Kaylan, what can I do for you? Does your secretary have the construction records of this base in your secretary's computer?" Kaylan asked. "There should be construction records, but which part do you want?" "I want photos and videos of the part where the rock formation was excavated and the foundation was poured. It's best if you can see Leviathan's spine under the rock formation." Kaylan pushed the keyboard in front of Manstein. "Okay, I'll help you find it right away." Manstein took a deep breath and tapped his fingers quickly on the keyboard. It didn't take long for those photos to appear on the screen. These were all photos taken at the beginning of the construction of the base. Heavy and large equipment was split into boxes of parts, transported directly to the sky above the construction site by airships, and then again the containers are lowered using steel cables. While the workers were assembling the parts below, construction machinery soon appeared on the construction site one after another. Kaylan kept clicking the mouse, flipping through the photos one by one. It was not until the 31 page that he finally saw the scene under the rock formation. The laser drilling machine cut 8 20-meter square deep wells on the rock formation, leading directly to Leviathan's body. Workers wearing engineering power armor will drive the pre-made alloy frames into the deep wells. The next step is to drill the rigid alloy. High-strength concrete is poured into the frame and foundation piles are poured. With the help of the strong light of the searchlight, you can vaguely see a white skeleton-like object at the bottom of the deep well. "This is the spine of Leviathan," Manstein said, pointing to it. "Are you sure this is Leviathan's spine? And not something else?" Kaylan asked. "Confirmed. Leviathan's spine is only covered with a layer of skin tissue several meters thick. There is almost no subcutaneous tissue and muscles, and there is no chitin carapace on the skin surface like the Thunder Beast. In just a few days, the big high-power laser can cut through this layer of skin, and then drive foundation piles directly on Leviathan's spine." Manstein replied that although he did not participate in the construction of this base, he wanted to become this base. The top person in charge must still do this homework. This is a bone," Kaylan said to himself in confusion. "Yes, it's bones. Leviathan is the same as all carbon-based organisms. Its spine is naturally made of bones," Manstein said from the side, "but its bones are really hard. Otherwise, the foundation could be dug deeper." Kaylan subconsciously tightened his grip on the mouse. However, what he saw in the image, Leviathan's bones were clearly that kind of ink-black crystal. Except for the chitin exoskeletons of crustaceans, the main components of the skeletons of most carbon-based organisms are calcium and phosphorus. The bones of the indigenous organisms on Alpha Planet also contain some additional metal elements to increase strength. This kind of skeleton may be able to support a body tens of meters high, but it is still too fragile for a behemoth like Leviathan. This pale bone surface is definitely not the spine of Leviathan, at least, not its true appearance. There is an extremely huge difference between this Leviathan beast and the one Kaylan saw in the video. But, that kind of jet black crystal appeared in the blood pool again, and there was the same dark red substance inside the crystal. This is definitely not a coincidence. There is only one Leviathan from beginning to end. According to the information provided by that video, Leviathan was obviously killed by the Alpha civilization, but the bugs that killed Leviathan were attached to Leviathan's bones, which made Kaylan unable to understand. Oh, could it be that Alpha civilization is trying to use the skeleton of the previous generation of Leviathan to create a new prehistoric behemoth? So, the Leviathan under their feet now is the one created by the Alpha civilization? Judging from the size of Leviathan, the amount of material required to resurrect it is an extremely terrifying number. When the Alpha civilization killed it, the death ray cannon annihilated Leviathan's body. More than half of the flesh and blood, that is to say, even if they put together all the remaining flesh and blood, it would be difficult to piece together a complete Leviathan. And after so many years, Leviathan's completeness still has not reached 100%. Even its blood vessels are still empty, let alone allowing this ancient beast to fly into the sky again. The current Leviathan is only a semi-finished product. If this guess is correct, then the previous problem can be easily explained. The seemingly weird behavior of those monsters is actually collecting nutrients for Leviathan's rebirth, and the giant cocoon in the square is actually a very special digestive organ. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 161. The most critical point now is, how far has Leviathan's rebirth progressed? How much flesh and blood does it need to absorb before it can wake up from its long sleep? At this moment, Layton opened the door of the office and hurriedly walked in. Kaylan, there is a reply from the Mitsui Consortium. They have reported the news of Emergency 000 to ARC headquarters, and at the same time notified us. Bien sent a rescue team. What should we do? This rescue team, isn't it here to silence them? Hound said in the communication channel. No, since it has been reported to ARC headquarters, they must have realized the seriousness of the matter. At least the people in the Mitsui Consortium have some brains, and they will not do such a thing that the enemy is still fighting among themselves. As long as someone is caught with evidence, it will be an irreparable fate. I'm still not at ease. Hound paused. Besides, Liao Zilang's life and death are unknown now. I'm afraid I won't be able to help but blow the heads of those Japanese guys. If Liao Zilang is still alive, it can only be taken away by those people. If you blow their heads, then Liao Zilang will probably be dead. Kaylan said. This matter cannot be rushed. As long as if they stand still, they won't take action against the hostages. Otherwise, what's the point of taking hostages? This is the reason. Alas, Hound sighed heavily. Forget it, you can arrange the next thing. Don't worry about my ideas, I will cooperate with you as much as possible. Layton also stepped forward and patted Kaylan on the shoulder, saying, Old dog, it's easy for him to deal with this kind of thing. Otherwise, he would probably be able to carry a general on his shoulders now. As for being mixed up like this, I know, but there is no need to rush, and there is no point in rushing. What's more, there is a bigger trouble in front of us. If this trouble can't be handled well, let alone Liao Zilang, I'm afraid the entire Leviathan, not many people on board can survive. After Kaylan finished speaking, he glanced at the digital clock hanging on the wall. It's almost time, the people from the Mitsui Consortium should arrive. As soon as he finished speaking, a sound of engines came from far and near, and 2 vertical takeoffs with the emblem of the Mitsui Consortium hovering over the square. Layton, can you establish communication with the people on the plane? I'm doing it. Okay. Layton patted the signal transceiver antenna that looked like an iron pot, and then handed the microphone to Kaylan. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? This is the mining base of the Soma Consortium. The communication identification number is LWT006SMA9943. Please reply if you receive it. Repeat. This is the mining base of the Soma Consortium. The communication identification number is LWT006SMA9943. There are dozens of survivors. 2 people, one of whom is seriously injured and in urgent need of medical assistance. Please call back when you receive it. Hiss, hiss. After a burst of noisy electricity, a voice with a Japanese accent came from K-Ian's earphones. Received. We are the Mitsui Foundation Special Rescue Team. The identification number is LWT00HE1202. There are medical personnel accompanying the Zeun. Personnel and supplies can provide you with immediate relief, but... The other party hesitated for a moment before continuing to ask, What is this thing in the square? It's the thing under our feet, Leviathan Kaylan answered in the shortest possible way. The communication channel suddenly fell into silence, and then the other person asked in a trembling voice, "You mean, this is part of Leviathan's body?" "Yes, it's not dead yet, and it's waking up." Compared to the other party, Ian's tone could be said to be unusually calm. Otherwise, how could it be emergency 000? How is this possible? The other party lost his voice. "Nothing is impossible. Besides, the wounded on our side are about to be exhausted. If you are here to provide rescue, please do it as soon as possible," Kaylan urged. Okay, please wait." After the other party said, one of the two vertical takeoff and landing aircraft flew towards the main control building. In the process, the pilot carefully avoided it. The airspace directly above the giant cocoon. Although the apron on the top floor had been blown to ashes, the vertical takeoff and landing aircraft had the same hovering ability as a helicopter, and medical personnel directly landed on the roof of the main control building with the help of rope ladders. "Please tell us the general condition of the injured so that we can carry out rescue operations immediately." The team was led by a young girl in a white coat who looked to be only 17 or 18 years old. She was carrying a huge medical box in one hand. In one hand, he is holding a badge with his identity written on it. Kaylan glanced at the badge and said, "Sakurai N.A., Director of the Emergency Department of the Medical Department, B-level physician. All legally registered doctors on ARC have professional titles. Different from the old era, the professional titles of doctors now are divided into 5 levels from E to A except for S-level experts, S-level professional titles. Often only certain doctors who have made special contributions to the medical field can obtain it. The number of people in ARC does not exceed 100. These 5 levels require doctors to pass the exam one by one, and it is not enough to rely solely on medical papers and written examination scores. In the examination scoring system, successful surgical cases with actual clinical experience account for a large proportion. Ivan's medical license is only C-level, and Kaylan doesn't even have E-level. It's battlefield first aid and emergency medical treatment, which can only be regarded as half-baked compared to a regularly registered doctor. Kaylan was slightly surprised that the girl in front of him, who was not yet 20 years old, actually had a B-level professional title. You know, in terms of ability, Ivan can actually get the B-level professional title a long time ago, but he is stuck on the accumulation of surgical cases. Many times, it is not necessary to operate on injured hunters outside the ARC. Including this, if you want to reach the B-level threshold, you must complete at least 400 major surgeries with complete records, and all of them must be the chief surgeon. It is no exaggeration to say that this girl can definitely be regarded as a genius girl. She actually sent such a person out to rescue. Does the Mitsui Foundation really have no worries at all? Not only are the hounds worried that the Mitsui Consortium may be detrimental to them, but relatively speaking, if they want to deliberately retaliate, the rescuers of the Mitsui Consortium will also bear a lot of risks. No one can be sure what the other party will do in a desperate situation. What measures were taken? Under such circumstances, the other party actually let the girl join the rescue team. If something happens to her, it will definitely be a huge loss for the Mitsui Consortium. It can even be said that this girl's life is much more valuable than hunters like them. Not only them, but also Manstein's value is not as good as hers. Could it be that the power behind UE is not the Mitsui Consortium? Kaylan couldn't help but have a doubt in his heart. But he quickly hid this doubt in his heart. Not only that, he didn't even mention a word about the attackers, and directly ignored the weird reactions of the medical staff following Sakurai after seeing the bomb tarmac. In their eyes, there seemed to be a silent understanding between the two parties. Our people have already dealt with the high-level amputation of both legs. The main problem at present is massive blood loss and the risk of infection. Immediate blood transfusion and gangrene removal are required, as well as anti-infective treatment. Kaylan led Sakurai Na and the others along the stairs. Walking down, he said quickly. "Are you a doctor?" Sakurai glanced at Kaylan and asked. "I'm not a doctor, but I have learned some battlefield first aid," Kaylan replied. "Have you brought type of blood plasma?" "Yes, you mentioned the blood type of the injured in the rescue message before." Sakurai nodded, "but can you tell me what exactly happened here?" "I heard, that thing outside is Leviathan. We discovered an unknown creature in the mine, and they attacked the base. As for the thing outside, it grew directly from the ground, from the top of Leviathan's spine." "Unknown creature? Attacked the base. Is there any connection with the thing in the square?" "As for Leviathan." Sakurai's eyes widened, and she was obviously confused by Ian's words. "It's hard to explain clearly in one sentence. Let's save people first. Of course Kaylan did it on purpose. There are too many things involved in this matter, and there are many things that are not suitable for the current occasion. To be clear, especially for Sakurai Na. Kaylan can almost confirm that Sakurai should be unaware of the previous attacks. In addition to her, the same should be true for the rescuers of the Mitsui Consortium. They discussed what they saw in the base without any secret. Kaylan even heard people talking more than once about topics such as if it was a monster attack, it would be impossible to cause this level of damage. It was obviously our human weapons that destroyed the tarmac. If it was a performance if they come, then this is not a medical rescue team, but a group of Oscar winners, right? From this point of view, there should be only two possibilities left. Mitsui Consortium and Kaylan have reached a subtle tacit understanding. Both parties kept silent about what happened before, and even the rescue team sent out is composed of completely uninformed people. This is already a way to express one's position and attitude. As for the other possibility, it can only mean that the incident was not done by the Mitsui Consortium. It was some kind of spy or invasion. It has nothing to do with them. But no matter which one it is the same for the current situation. The first thing they have to solve is the big problem of Leviathan. Leviathan must not be resurrected. Otherwise, with the current military power of mankind, unless the Ark is directly driven over and bombarded with the main cannon, even if all the fleets are put in, they may not be able to suppress this ancient beast. The current Leviathan is no longer the same creature as the Leviathan in that virtual image. The current Leviathan has been transformed by the Alpha civilization into a strange and powerful biological weapon. For humans, this is not just a simple matter of losing a rich crystal mine. No one is sure what actions Leviathan will take after rebirth, even if it crashes into the Ark parked on the equator. Is also entirely possible. Leviathan, which has been transformed by Alpha civilization, can accumulate the progress bar of rebirth by absorbing the flesh and blood of aliens. Then it can also continue to use this method to continuously strengthen itself after resurrection, and even complete another evolution, and possess the Ark, with a population of more than 50 million, was obviously a meal that was hard to refuse for Leviathan. According to Ian's idea, the best solution is to evacuate all personnel stationed on Leviathan, then use ground-penetrating missiles to directly destroy the giant cocoon in the square, and finally set up an isolation zone around Leviathan. Drive away all the indigenous creatures that come close to here. As long as it cannot get nourishment, Leviathan's rebirth progress will always stagnate at its current state. But the problem is, how can he make the officials believe in his judgment? He is the only one who can read the words on the black stone tablet, and he is the only one who has seen the image of the beast's fall. From an outsider's perspective, what he sees is some of what he said can only be regarded as conjectures. No, not even conjectures, they are completely unfounded alarmism. Even if the Security Bureau arrested him for spreading rumors, it would not be an exaggeration. The only evidence is the giant cocoon outside. As long as you dig down along the route of the giant cocoon, you will definitely get more clues, but in Ian's subconscious, there is always a voice stopping him. Originally, he didn't believe in these things, but after what happened in the glacier ruins, he had to believe in these things, and the facts also proved that the information that was instilled in his memory was true and precise. Kaylan couldn't turn a blind eye to it, but sometimes he was very entangled. After all, he couldn't be sure whether these supernatural events were intentional by the Alpha people. This might be a trap set by them, and he was just a chess piece that happened to be selected. The situation is worse than I believed. This was the first thing Sakurai said after seeing the seriously injured person. Get ready for rescue immediately. I need a sterile environment. Is it available here? No. Kaylan shook his head. This is one of the few rooms in the entire base that is relatively well preserved. The conditions in other places will not be better than here. Okay. Sakurai tied her long hair back, and the assistant next to her immediately handed over the disinfectant. I will try my best, but there is no guarantee that I can save the person. Yes. Kaylan and Yvonne looked at each other and nodded. If he survives, it means he is lucky. You don't have to worry. Good. Leaving Sakurai and her assistant behind, Kaylan and others walked out of the secretary's office and moved to another room. At this time, the rescuers on the second vertical takeoff and landing aircraft also successfully landed on the roof of the building and were brought over by Layton. I am Mitsuisuke, the commander of the Mitsui Consortium for this rescue operation. He glanced at Manstein. It was obvious that he knew the base director of the Soma Consortium, but soon, he put his eyes on Kaylan and stretched out his hand to Kaylan. You should be the person with the highest authority here. What should I call you? Kaylan, special consultant of the Soma Consortium, temporary top manager of the Leviathan mining base. Kaylan shook hands with Mitsuisuke. I am very grateful to the Mitsui Consortium for the rescue. The situation is urgent, so I will keep the story short. Kaylan turned his head and walked to the shattered floor-to-ceiling window. He pointed at the giant cocoon not far away and said to Mitsuisuke, you should have seen this thing when you were on the plane. Mitsuisuke did not speak, but nodded solemnly. According to our investigation, this thing grew out of Leviathan's spine and is most likely part of Leviathan's body. In other words, this mountain-like beast under our feet is still alive. And there are already signs of awakening. P.S. The electric switch at home tripped indefinitely today, and it was delayed until the evening to fix it, so the update was late. Moreover, these 2 chapters were written in a hurry, and they were uploaded as soon as they were written. Please forgive me for any typos or minor bugs in the end. Okay, I can help catch bugs in this chapter. I will go to the backend to modify it when I see it.